Hey guys, it's BlockchainBrad, and today I'm very honoured to speak with none other than the founder, CEO and Managing Director of Zebi, and that is Babu Munagala. Babu, thank you very much for your time today and welcome to the channel.
Thank you, Brad. Honored to be here.
Likewise, mate. So obviously you are a very important figure for the Zebi chain, for the Zebi network. But let's talk about you briefly for a moment. I've written down a few notes about your credentials and hopefully you can explain them. But you've had 20 years of experience in the Silicon Valley. You've also achieved a Bachelor of Technology at university, and then you've gone on and done a master's degree at Ohio. You've been involved in significant areas of tech for some time now. So could you tell us a bit more about your background and why you're best positioned for this kind of role?
Yeah, certainly. So I completed my BTech in aerospace engineering from IIT Madras. You probably know about IITs. They are
Yes.
top universities in India and across the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I moved to computer science, did a master's in another university in India called IISc.
Okay.
That's also a top university, but they haven't done too much of marketing. But in some sense, the Indian Institute of Science,
I see.
they do much more research and development than just technology.
I see.
Right?
So you've done a lot in India in itself before you moved abroad.
Yeah. That was probably 95 time frame.
Okay.
And then I came to Ohio State University to do a PhD in computer science.
Right.
And I quickly realized the research I thought is not really the true fundamental research that's done in even in the Indian Institute of Science where I did my master's.
Right.
And I chose to go into the industry because I felt what's really happening in some of the universities is really very similar to the industry type of work.
Mm-hmm.
I felt it's better to get in. I mean, internet is booming those days, right? It's 97 time frame.
Right.
I saw there is a huge opportunity. Internet has just started, so I joined the industry.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay Area for like you said, almost 20 years. Right? Oracle US, worked in databases, applications, middleware, generally across the stack. I mean, Oracle gave that huge opportunity.
And it's really great that you've mentioned the word database in there, obviously because of the premise of blockchain and what it stands for. It's definitely related to your experience and your skill set in the database field. Let's talk about that briefly as well. What did attract you to the blockchain? Just generally from your experience.
I mean, I personally didn't know about blockchain for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's invented in 2008 and started in 19. So we came across blockchain in 2015 after we started Zebi. I guess I was in the corporate world for so long.
That's interesting. So the concept of Zebi came before it precipitated the blockchain infrastructure.
Right. I mean, as you might have realized, Zebi comes from Zebi byte.
Right.
It's a very large number, right?
Yes.
1 trillion gigabytes.
Yes.
And that's how much data India is going to generate in 2020.
Right. Well, we're going to talk about that now. Let's get stuck into the real crux of why we're having a chat today, and that is about Zebi. On the internet, it says on the website that you are blockchain India's big data. It also explains that essentially, there's been some serious background research being done and also some key stakeholders with Stanford, MIT, Oxford. So a lot of experience in your team as well. But let's talk about big data, particularly high-value data, and how it relates to Zebi as a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the fundamental question that we started with. Right. And we still continue, answering that question in a very, very comprehensive way, mm-hmm. right? So there is so much data getting generated, and obviously our focus is on people data. People's sensitive personal information. Mm-hmm. How do we protect it? And how do we? It's not like a jewelry where you can stash it away in a faraway island, and keep it so inconvenient to access. By definition, if something is so inconvenient, it's secure.
Right.
And as the whole world is digitizing, it's in a very obvious sense, it's becoming less secure, right? Because digitization, overall, computerization is making things so convenient, both for the users and also for the hackers. Right? The hackers are able to steal away so quickly just because it's all put in a centralized database. Right. It's all digitized.
Let's talk about that in a centralized capacity first, to put it in a context for our audience. What does it look like, in a centralized model with regard to the way in which high-value data is stored and is utilized?
Yeah, I mean, best example is Equifax, right? Okay. I mean, they provided a lot of efficiency. They help, a lot of financial institutions make decisions very, very quickly. Credit applications, loan applications, various financial related decision making that can be done very, very quickly, the convenience is super high.
Right.
But the compromise obviously happened on the security side because it's so convenient for a legitimate user to access data, verify data, and the same convenience was given to everybody, including the malicious insiders and the hackers.
I see.
Right.
So you're addressing quite a few problems. Let's talk about those specifically. Let's talk about the issues of forgery, theft, tampering, data leaks, hacks, abuse and misuse. These are key words that are really the things you're trying to redress in your new model.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. So when we started in 2015, the fundamental question we asked is, because data is such a fluid asset, it's accessible to your own employees, it's accessible to your database administrators, and you cannot stop them from accessing your data. Is there a technology that can make certain things immutable?
Right.
So as to say, once I put something on a record, nobody should be changing it. No human should be able to change it. Right. That's the question that I had, for like several months in 2015. Right. And we looked at hardware machines that can actually burn the chip. You write once into the machine and the whole chip is burnt. Right. These are, you might have heard about WORMS, like write once, read only after that. Right.
Yes.
And those are obviously, they do the job, but they're very, very expensive, not suitable for big data.
Right.
Right. Then we discovered, kind of accidentally, blockchain, right? And we saw the power. Obviously, it creates that immutable ledger, and no human can kind of go back and delete or update the historical immutable ledger.
Right.
And that's where we saw that, oh man, I know it's being used for cryptocurrencies and the typical financial industry use cases, but nobody was using it for securing data.
I see.
Even now, I don't think there are too many people.
So essentially, the blockchain was offering that immutability factor. It was providing something that hadn't been done before, and you realized that, and now are capitalizing on that through your architecture, through your program, through your company.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Interesting. If we could talk now about some of the government links. I've noticed in your literature, particularly on your website, there's a huge boon happening, for your company with regard to government connections. Obviously, India is the primary focus right now. So let's talk about that in the context of Zebi.
Sure. So the new governments happened around 2014 timeframe, right? The elections happened, and a lot of the new age, forward-looking governments were elected in both at the central government, the government of India level, and in multiple states, right? All of these governments, I don't want to obviously give too many names here, but they are very, very forward-looking. They love technology, and obviously people elected them for good reasons, right? And they're all realizing that the only way for them to succeed, in some sense, even if they are very selfish and want to get re-elected, right? In the next election, they have to do the right thing. They have to do something that the citizens can remember, and the citizens have to get, persistent benefits, and that's only possible through right technology.
Right.
So some of these, even the state governments, both Andhra Pradesh and Telangana governments, they've been very, very keen and aggressive in adopting new technologies, right? And in some cases, actually faster than enterprises.
Right.
That's very interesting. Like the banks in India, they're, at least in my experience, they happen to kind of, be slower in adopting new technologies than some of these governments. Right? Just because they have, new energy, they have, very, very visionary leaders that want to promote and even adopt new technologies as part of their government processes.
I see. So clearly you have established very strong relationships with specific states or even governments within India. Let's go to some specific ones. I know that you can't mention everyone, but certainly there are some you have mentioned before. And just what kind of breadth and scope are these relationships with these governments covering in terms of population, in terms of importance for your project?
So the Andhra Pradesh government is one of the large states, right? It's more than 40 million people. Right. India is a country with a lot of people, right? 1.3 billion is the total population.
Sure.
Right? And even Telangana government, they have similar population.
Right.
Just a little bit, a few million, higher or lower, but around the 40 million, 50 million range.
So a significant target market already for the entirety of your population, and you're already having success in some of these regions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We have signed an agreement already with the Andhra Pradesh government. We haven't signed anything official with the Telangana government yet, just to be clear on the record.
Okay, but you do say yet, so you sound like you're optimistic about future signings and future relationships?
Absolutely, absolutely. Just because of their own inclination to adopt new technologies.
Sure. And the reason why I ask you, and I ask you this, Babu, because obviously for investors, for anyone wanting to know more about your project, they want to see some grassroots progress being made, and clearly you've already forged some of that with real actual contracts being set forth with governments. So let's talk about, if we pull it back again to a bit more of unpacking the what of Zebi. So obviously you are by design your own company, but let's talk about the product itself. Let's talk about Zebi Chain specifically.
Sure.
So what is it and how does it work?
Zebi Chain, like I said earlier, the fundamental goal of the product is to protect data against tampering and possibly against hacking as well. So again, hacker-proof, it needs the whole architecture, not just Zebi Chain, right? It needs Zebi Gateway also. Okay. But Zebi Chain can do 100% tamper-proof. The way it works is we have a private blockchain, right? Again, these are government departments that are not ready for public blockchains yet. And we are also having a very deep research and development project to create our own Zebi public blockchain. Obviously, that's not out there yet. We haven't published anything in the open source world yet. It's really in the research and development stage where we're designing and we're brainstorming, and we feel there is a big opportunity there.
Right. Well, just to clarify for the audience, let's just to extrapolate that, is that currently you are by design in the Zebi chain specifically private, as a blockchain, but you're also planning on establishing your own public entity, your public blockchain entity later, and down the track. But right now, let's get clear. You do have a solution for your private blockchain requirements, and that's through Ethereum at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah. So we have a private blockchain that integrates with the public blockchain, right? So that gives us that 100% tamper-proof, because having a private blockchain alone cannot give the complete tamper-proof, right? That like the hardcore blockchain experts would know, right? It has to be linked to a public domain, publicly visible, completely decentralized, from any single owner.
I see. So what would you say to people who, and I've heard this in the past, and it's important we broach this, what would you say to those people who would argue that, it's a concern that you are so heavily privatized by design as Zebi Chain itself?
So that's a way to get into the door of these governments, right? Because, there is the other side of the governments where they're not too comfortable putting everything in the public domain yet, right? But think of this as a transition plan. Think of this as a first step in the door. And as they trust Zebi, as they understand Zebi, as they see the value proposition, I feel that we can gradually push them to public domain as well.
I see. So again, as I said before, on your website explains that you are trying to be a blockchain-driven, unique and holistic solution to make high value and sensitive data readily accessible. But let's talk about some of the use cases of this in the real world. Where would it fit? What kind of industries are we talking about?
So land records is obviously a great industry.
Right.
Just in India alone, more than 70% of all the court cases, imagine there are about 3 crore pending court cases. That's like a huge number by any measure. Even if you divide it by number of people, it's still huge number, per person number of pending court cases, right? There's a lot of disputes, kind of ambiguity about various things in India. And 70% of those pending court cases are just because of one reason. And that is the property disputes. Okay. Who owns this land, right? So there's a lot of ambiguity, there's a lot of confusion about this, and the land prices, the asset prices are increasing. All over the world and significantly in India, right? So it's a big problem, both from a political angle, both from, emotional angle for the people. So there is, a lot of motivation to solve it if there is a real solution, obviously, right? Because even if they put it on a traditional database system, like we discovered earlier, the traditional database system could be hacked, could be tampered. So the real protection is not really coming without blockchain.
And it's not immutable as well, as you said.
Exactly. So Zebi Chain, with its private blockchain and the Ethereum public blockchain integration, it is able to provide that 100% immutability and really solve this widespread India-wide situation completely.
Absolutely.
Right? Once it's put on Zebi Chain, no more conflicts, no more confusion, no more court cases.
Right, exactly. And obviously the land aspect, that was heavily articulated through your white paper and through the website. But I noticed that there's many more use cases than even that. It's mentioned that your targets are also enterprise, governments, universities, educational institutions. Really that land aspect it seems to be just one example. So,
absolutely.
So is that really just, the beginnings for you in your scope?
Right. So in terms of the high value data, like I said, the land records is where there is so much dispute or ambiguity about the quality of the data. So that's where it's a natural, way to start and make a footprint and make a statement saying there is Zebi, there is this product, and it can be used for different types of high value data. And we already got that kind of very organic messaging done in India. I mean, by the way, we didn't spend much at all on marketing.
I see.
Very little. And I'm a conservative person, and I didn't want to. I said no to $1 million requests for marketing companies, or even $500,000. Somebody asked for $400K. I said no. It didn't make sense. They didn't show me the value. I asked them, how are you going to spend my $400K?
Right.
And they gave some answers, and that didn't seem like truth.
And what's interesting, going back to what you said about the ambiguity of some high-value data, that again seems to be your key focus, is trying to make the transition from the ambiguous to the clarified, to the clear, the concise, the accurate. So let's talk about that in the context now of two aspects of your design. One of them is your Zebi Data Gateway, the hub system, that's going to interlink things. Can you tell us a bit more about that and how that works with the Zebi Chain?
Absolutely. I think that's a good segue, because you also asked on how Zebi overall solution can take care of different types of data as well.
Right.
So we need Zebi Data Gateway to actually give that complete solution, right?
Yes.
So think of Zebi Chain as a pure tamper-proof solution. So as a data provider, as a data custodian, land record owner, or an educational institute, or an employment provider like an employer that has the custody of very sensitive salary information of people, right? So they're the custodians of the data, and in our white paper we're using the word data provider. Right? It's a generic word, covers even bank transactions, for example. Right? The data provider is where the data is sitting in their system. Right? So Zebi Chain, we expect hundreds of Zebi chains to be installed just in India. Right, in all of these data providers. So the huge advantage of Zebi Chain model is the data is not leaving the data provider. Right? If you compare it to Equifax, the data has left the original data owner, and it's kind of gone into hands of a lot of people. Right? Right. So once such a valuable asset, like we discussed earlier, such a fluid asset, leaves the hands of one person, imagine what can happen, and that's what happened in US, right? Right. So all over. Right. So by way of also integrating the public blockchain, you're enfranchising the maintenance of control by making sure that the user has their autonomy and their ability to manipulate their own data, to be authors of their own data. Exactly. So now imagine, there is a nice picture we have in the website where Zebi Data Gateway is at the center. Okay. And there are Zebi chains all around it, right? So if you imagine that picture, you have Zebi Data Gateway at the center, and then all around it, you have Zebi chains, right? So there is a Zebi chain at a land records data provider. There's another Zebi chain at a different government's land records provider. And there's another Zebi chain at education records, employment records. Hence you call it the hub, much like the a hub and spoke model. The spokes would act as the chains themselves. If we could talk also now about your data as service, means of transfer, achieving that transfer with your API system. So you call it the DaaS, or the data as service system. So how does that work? So Zebi Data Gateway now is able to access so many Zebi chains, right? Because it's at the center. There's only one Zebi Data Gateway. It's centralized in a way. But the beautiful way is it's not a vault. It's not persisting anything. It's not storing any data. So that's the big differentiator. Okay. Again, going back to the Equifax model. Yes. So Zebi Data Gateway is a very lightweight pass-through a gateway where a request comes, and then we talk to the data provider, and the response is sent back to the data requester.
I see. So it's quite simplistic by design. You don't store centrally.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I like the word simplistic you used, right? I mean, that was exactly what we wanted to keep it that way. So, anything that we keep simple, I mean, there's more control, there is more security, we can plan better, there is a lot more transparency.
Right. Obviously, keeping the KISS principle in this context, keeping it simple really makes a lot of sense when you're trying to secure data.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the India opportunity right now. We noticed that there are some smart cities happening, that relate to your project. Some serious money involved as well. Can you tell us a bit more about what's rolling out?
So the smart city initiative is again, same, on the same lines of modernizing, using modern technologies for better governance, right? That's what the central government, the government of India, is doing. Some of the state governments are very motivated, right? And the budgets are actually issued directly from the central government, because some of the state governments actually don't have that much money, within their own budget limitations.
Right.
So the smart city initiative is actually funded directly by the central government, and the fundamental idea is, because there are so many rural areas in India, right? Not proper roads, not basic landline, for example, actually didn't even happen in a lot of India, right? We leapfrog directly into mobile cell phone usage, right? So the government of India is thinking, how can we modernize? How can we make a city smarter? How can we make a region much smarter and modern, right? That's the initiative really there. And obviously protecting data, modernizing how data is stored, how data is used. That's part of the smart city initiative, and that, obviously that helps us, create that, the customer, a motivated customer being there to actually purchase Zebi's products.
Well, let's draw that in a bit more. Let's unpack that, because it's really important we make that correlation between you as Zebi, the Zebi Chain and the Zebi project, and these smart cities. So we've talked about, well, we haven't yet, but there's certainly the figures that I've read are $15 billion for some of these smart city missions. There's 100 smart cities, trying to, evolve in the Indian regions around. Is that correct? There's quite a few that are planning to become smart cities, but obviously there are some that are key, and we mentioned one of them that's now part of the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, and you're signing contracts with some of these cities and these regions. So, what's the clear link? Why is it that these smart cities are so key and so beneficial for Zebi?
Right. I mean, whenever I try to sell my product to a customer, right? The customer is already motivated. They already know blockchain. They already know that they want to modernize. It's easy. Right? I don't have to convince them the importance of my product.
Right.
And that's what is happening because of the initiatives that the government of India is taking. Right? And like you said, huge budgets are happening. And Andhra Pradesh government is part of the EEA Enterprise Alliance, Ethereum Alliance. Right. So that's all. That's kind of making it easier for innovators like us to go there and show them that yes, we have a real product. I know you have the intention to adopt new technologies. We have the product, so take us.
I see. So essentially, these cities are pro-innovation and certainly pro-blockchain.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. If we could also now move into a bit more of the tech talk, I do want to unpack this relationship between Ethereum as the public blockchain entity and Zebi Chain as the private. Why is having this public blockchain facility so important for the user?
Oh, to give that 100% tamper-proof, right? I mean, the private blockchain, there are a lot of companies trying to, I was at a blockchain conference yesterday in Chennai. I was on stage, talking on, how Zebi does things differently. And there are a lot of these, big banks, big consulting companies. They're trying to promote and, pretend that enterprise blockchain, as it's called. I mean, it's really a private blockchain, right? Enterprise blockchain is as good as public blockchain. There are questions coming from audience. They asked very specifically.
Yes.
And these big companies, obviously they have their incentives. I mean, they're employees, right? Working, they're taking salary from the company, so they have a incentive to support their company, right? They make it look like enterprise blockchain, / private blockchain is as good. Right?
Yes.
And we know that without a public blockchain link, it doesn't make any sense, right? It's not a blockchain at all.
Exactly, and that's why I want to talk about this further, because clearly one of the other things that you mentioned before is that data itself is distributed and it's controlled by the user. That's fundamental to the use of Ethereum in this case.
Right, absolutely.
But let's talk about that a little bit further, and it's something that I'm not familiar with yet. I'm hoping you obviously get an answer from you. But at the moment, you are using the Ethereum network as the public blockchain conduit. ERC20 token is the design of your own token. But are you planning on, essentially being an agnostic framework? You've mentioned you want to become your own blockchain, but is there any way or consideration for any other blockchain before that happens that you may even expand to?
You mean like a Bitcoin or a different blockchain and not Ethereum?
Well, I'm sure you're not surprised if I say Neo.
Yeah. We haven't really looked at that honestly, but we'll be happy to. We'll be happy to if there is a differentiation. If obviously if there is a lower cost, for example, Ethereum is very expensive in terms of depending on how many times we publish the hash into Ethereum public blockchain.
Yes, and it's also slower in comparison to Neo, as I understand too. So there's advantages, and also Neo is more local to you. So a bit of a plug for Neo. But it is good to know, getting back to the point, it's good to know that you are open-minded about the prospect of other blockchains.
Yeah, I've heard nice things about Neo as well. Yes, certainly, we'll start looking at that.
Sure. Well, what I like about your Zebi Chain you've mentioned before is the lightweight nature. You explained that again, a lot of the requirements of a typical centralized model, perhaps, or a permission blockchain are just not necessary for yours, and you can be lightweight. You've explained why it's private, but let's talk about these key features. Let's talk about your trusted verifications, your consent, security, and privacy. Just in a broad sense, why are these features of your design?
Yeah, so there is a theme of data democracy that's been talked about by senior people like Nandan Nilekani. He's the creator of Aadhaar in India. He talks about something called data democracy, right? And I believe like other leaders across the world are talking about this. Maybe in a different phrase, not exactly data democracy, but what it really means. For example, GDPR in European Union, right? That's going to be a huge deal. Huge fines, 20 million euros, or a big percentage of the global revenues of a company if they violate the global, is it data protection regulation, GDPR, right? Privacy regulation, essentially, right? So the question all of these leaders or the governments or the policy makers, they're asking is, can we give more control to individual about their data, right? And I believe that actually solves two problems. One, it makes things fair, right? We as individuals get to keep our privacy. And actually, it also increases security overall, right? Imagine a hacker having to beg each individual for stealing their data.
Right, exactly.
Right. So that's what we're looking at. I mean, that's not currently there in our live product yet, but obviously that's there in our product roadmap. That's part of our designs, and that's something that's implementation is in progress.
Right, and obviously, as people become more familiar and aware with what the blockchain offers, they'll start to no doubt see the value in having control and authorship of their own data, and fundamentally, or be able to trust a system that is allowing for a more trustless design.
Yeah. So another angle that we plan to introduce, again, it's part of the designs, is enforcing smart contracts on how the data is utilized.
Right.
So it's completely visible, transparent on how many times the data is accessed, how many times the data is updated, how many times, and the individual can see it, right? So they have very, very clear visibility. They don't have to go through a third-party reporting agency to, trust them that, yes, a hack happened, but sorry, we forgot to tell you about the hack, for 3 months. Right?
I think it's a great point. And also with regard to trackability, often there's this misnomer that, blockchains are somehow able to circumvent, certain authorities and certainly not, and be in a utopian sense, very privatized. But the reality is there are significant means in which you can track the blockchain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that an advantage, would you say, for the security and for the peace of mind of the user?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I mean, it gives that peace of mind. It gives that security. It gives that kind of trust. Right. Increases the trust. And it's much more important in India than other countries. And obviously, it's useful everywhere. Right. But it's a big seller here, right?
Sure.
There is a leapfrog that we're able to do in India. compared to where we are versus where we can go using blockchain.
Well, Babu, could we talk about now, obviously you have this, I guess, subscription-based model with your private, I guess, product-based Zebi Chain trademark product. But are you planning on also integrating fiat and cryptocurrencies, into the design so that they can be seamlessly used? And I guess, there's a bit of a collaboration between the two.
Absolutely, absolutely. So obviously the three types of revenues that we mentioned in the white paper, the subscription revenues for Zebi Chain product itself, and data transaction fees, like when a land registration happens, the transaction, there is a fee that Zebi gets.
Right.
And the third one is the data access fee. When a bank or a financial institution or even another individual is accessing the data to verify that, yes, this person actually owns the record, or this person has studied in this university, or this person is actually getting this much salary and he's employed with this company, right? So all the three types of revenues, we initially plan to accept a fiat as well, just to again keep it practical, not disrupt too much, because disruption is sometimes taken to extreme, it may never happen, right? You have to do in phases, and we feel that getting attraction, getting visibility, creating that ecosystem where people see the value in using Zebi platform. And if they pay in fiat for a temporary period, that's fine. And we expect them to, once there is a heavy dependency on Zebi platform, once they see the real value, once there is a good quorum of users using Zebi solution, I don't think they'll be paying in Zebi coins. We can gently push them to use only Zebi coins to use our products and services.
I think that's a perfect segue also into the other thing that you've mentioned in your white paper, and that is the data boom. Because obviously as that grows and intensifies, the greater the ease of use and integration of cryptocurrencies for the average user. But what exactly is this data boom that's happening in regions like in India?
Oh, the data is growing significantly, right? I don't know the current number in India. It's like 35% or so every year growing.
Wow, that's
and
a lot.
2020, by 2020, I believe it's 3 zebibytes of data.
Right.
To reach, right?
So in that respect, there's a huge market demand.
Absolutely. I think what you're implying is, the more data there is, there are more data access fees, and there is, more, potential for Zebi to, kind of monetize and make use of that.
Yeah. So, and then obviously it translates down to the investor as well. There's actually a very viable product that, people can see has a real value point in terms of real world usage and application. If we could now talk about global interest. You've mentioned obviously the different states in India, and that's a huge focus right now. But I've also noticed that countries like Singapore, the US also are interested in you. Can you tell us a bit more about the global interest that you've heard or that you know about?
Yeah. So in our journey, right? 2015 is when we started the company, and end of 2015 is when we realized the blockchain. And 2016 is when we spent most of the year building our own innovation, patent pending product, right? We already filed the patent. 2 more patents are in progress, right? And 2017 is when we approached multiple governments. We already signed a deal, right? So from this year onwards, we are very fortunate to receive incoming calls because we don't have a marketing team. We are a very small team. We have a bunch of architects, mentors, and advisors from Silicon Valley, Bay Area, across the globe. But we don't have a marketing or a sales team, right? Not such a big team. We're, mostly a product company, using our own network to pitch to our clients and getting deals done, right?
Sure.
But from January, February, we're already in March now, right? In the last couple of months, I started receiving incoming calls. 2 independent calls from US, 2 independent calls from Australia, and one call from Bangladesh, and one from Africa region.
Really?
These are all companies doing something with those enterprises, BFSI or governments, and they feel that, adding Zebi blockchain to their array of products is a huge differentiator for them. So they're thinking, okay, how do I grow? How do I attract more customers? Or how do I upsell my product to existing customers? And they're organically realizing that, oh man, there is already a Zebi product that has built a globally innovative product. Can I tag on Zebi Chain into my product, as a partner?
Right.
And that helps both sides.
So essentially, let's talk about that for a moment. Right now, you don't have your own blockchain, but you do have your own product, essentially. It's all being patented. It's all complete. And you could certainly leverage, your own everything that you do have now and make these agreements with these countries. But what will you do down the track when you do have your own blockchain? How will that change the game?
We'll provide the same features, right? The data protection feature, the comprehensive solution I talk about in the website or in the white paper, right? Because you can't provide just security and forget about convenience, because then it will become very inconvenient to access data, right? So in our comprehensive solution, what we said is number one is the efficiency and speed, right? And the second is the tamper-proof that gives higher level of trust. And the third one is the security and hacker-proof. And the fourth one is really, that's my favorite, is the data democracy and inclusive, including all the individuals in the whole solution, right?
Right.
And those features will be there even in the public blockchain that we are designing, and that will not change. So as a customer of Zebi, they may not see too much of difference, but they'll see higher level of visibility, they'll see higher level of transparency because it's in the public blockchain.
I see. And obviously, essentially for you, Babu, sorry to interrupt, but the key difference won't be so much for the user. They won't see a change or transition from, let's say, an Ethereum blockchain to your own, but they for your position, you'll see more economy, a greater financial benefit, because you're not obviously paying those fees to a different source.
Exactly. That's a good point, Brad. Yeah. Yes.
So that's interesting that you are planning on that. Can we talk about your devs for a moment? So if you have this longitudinal vision of your own blockchain, you're going to need great developers for that. So have you got a team, or are you building your team to achieve it?
We have a great team. Out of the 22 employees,
22
I think
is quite a good number.
Yeah. They're all full time. I mean, we have about 15 architects, mentors, and advisors across the world, like I said, right?
Right.
These are all, they join our weekly calls, they help, they mentor, they train the India team, right? The way we worked out is, I hired Funny Arega, for example. He's my junior in IIT Madras, within the network. I knew him for several years before, I pulled him into Zebi. And the actual developers, the core developers, the way we hired is, it may be a little bit different than most companies do.
Okay.
We had the time, we wanted to grow organically. We didn't want to pay too much salaries, right? There are companies, even in India, that pay, much more salary than what we do.
Right.
They do a different type of work. I mean, it's not as creative, it's not as innovative, it's not as, satisfying for an average developer, right? So what we did is we found people, like, we have a very tough screening. There is, I think, less than 0.1%, like out of 1,000 people that write our written test, or, people that send resumes, we only select like a handful of people, right? Okay. So it's a couple of people out of 1,000 people. And, in some sense, the quality of education, the quality of people that we have in India, it's unfortunately not that great, right? And, and it's important to have a very, very clear filter, well-defined, very strict filter.
Let's talk about, obviously we've alluded to your global reach in terms of business, but let's talk about that in terms of employees as well, because obviously you've referenced a significant number of those in India, but aren't you also considering the scope of your employees globally as you build out?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Bay Area is a great place. I've been there for more than, very, very close to 20 years, right? And I love the place, the beaches, the views, right? Right. And obviously there's a great startup ecosystem over there as well. Right. So we already have like a Zebi Inc. There's a legal entity that's already there. That's there. We hired a few part-time developers. Okay. Way back in 2016 when we were like literally bootstrapping Zebi. Right. Right. We had just a handful of people in India full time. Yeah. And again, like I said, we didn't want to pay huge full-time salaries, and and most of these people are kind of they jump very quickly, right? They don't stay with the same company because they got high salary, and then they get another rise and they jump again, right? These are not the true believers, right? So, and in that phase, I did hire a bunch of people from the Bay Area, from people in Sunnyvale, people in Mountain View. We paid them in US dollars. I mean, that's why we created the legal entity in US. I see. And we have, we are legally, structurally, it's fairly straightforward for us to expand and, create a team in the Bay Area.
I see. So obviously you are thinking well and truly in the global sense. If we could now just go back a bit more to the use case, because I think it's really fundamental. It's something we haven't broached specifically in terms of industries enough, I think. Now, you have a proprietary nature, but how can you operate in these areas of healthcare and education particularly? How can you really facilitate those two industries?
So the model is fairly simple, right? We're saying there is a Zebi chain at the data provider. Let's look at the education, right? So we're talking to a few universities, and we haven't signed any deal yet. But they're very motivated. They seems to be interested. They seem to understand the differentiation. That like there is a digital campus, but what I'm telling them is digital campus is less secure than a paper campus, non-digital campus. So they need, they need blockchain campus to be complete, right? So they understand that. But that's our second priority. Right? I mean, we were focusing so much on land records. The education sector we just started in the last few months.
Okay.
Right. So there is a Zebi chain at each of the universities where the education certificates data is there. Again, they go through the Zebi Data Gateway for providing instant data as a service API access.
I see. So you've already spoken with universities specifically and set this up.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're in clear hands.
That's impressive.
Yeah. I mean, somebody actually asked me yesterday, why are you, don't you want to focus on one industry, right? Education industry is so different from land industry. So the way that we are approaching this is, if you look at even Zebi Chain, right? The core of Zebi Chain is completely data model agnostic. It doesn't know data model.
Right.
It's key value pairs. We use Cassandra. Right, that's the true big data paradigm. Right, you can't know the data model upfront, but it provides that 100% immutability, tamper-proof protection.
Right,
and there are layers on top of Zebi Chain that that are specific to land records, that are specific to education, that are specific to employment or health. Right, so we have that capability, and obviously I'll have a separate marketing and sales for each industry. Right, separate marketing division, just to cater to education, because that obviously needs its own attention and its own time to talk to the people, spread the message, close the deals.
And Babu, it's so great that you're mentioning this, because there's a lot of people who've read your white paper who may only think of the land industry or the lands department and what you're providing there. But it's so important that they understand you are, as you said, industry agnostic. And you're catering for all of them.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. And like you said, we did the white paper. We're all mostly technical people, right? We didn't pay anybody, lots of dollars to make the white paper look more glamorous. You might have seen. Right?
Yeah, that's fine. Though I think that sometimes the brevity of it is a good thing.
Yeah. And in that sense, maybe it didn't come out too obvious that we are catering to multiple industries.
Well, obviously the land industry is a big focus right now, and I understand that. But if we could just, sorry to interrupt, but obviously we're pressed for time. Could we talk now about the ICO? Look, let's talk about your token structure, your token model, all of those things that people who are considering or have invested in you want to know. So your token's called the Zebi CEO token. I'm not sure if there's another way to say that, but you are an ERC20 token. But let's talk about essentially, firstly, your token distribution design and your allocation to the crowd sale as opposed to what you've retained for your own corporation, for your own business.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that and let's reason it.
Yeah, certainly. So obviously it's a utility token. We are clearly telling everybody that it's not a security, it's not an investment, it's a participation in a fundraise, and purely utility token, right? So we consciously kept 500 million with the company as company reserves, and there were a lot of questions asked, and I clearly mentioned that all of them are locked down for at least 18 months.
Okay, so let's just go backtrack. In total, there are 1 billion tokens. You've kept half of them. That's correct?
Right.
For R&D and for your own team. And that team can't touch those tokens for a period of, how long was it?
So out of the 500 million, 175 million is the maximum that we allocate to to people, to individual team members, founders, executives, right?
And obviously, it's difficult talking about this. It's something that most CEOs certainly wouldn't do. But the reason why I broached it is, based on what you said, is that typically we have seen a propensity in the industry right now for most tokens to be treated as securities, as you know, and that often there's an idea that every token is somehow an investment, as a longitudinal hodl, as they say in the industry. But in fact, the design of the ZCO is really to be something of use, and that's why it's called the utility token. So what would you say to the people who are seeing the value tokenomically as a hodl, as opposed to the very premise you're standing by, and that is to use it?
Yeah, I mean, this is a pure utility, and and people who are participating, I believe they're using it, because of the utility, right, not as an investment, not as any other reason. And that's what we stated very clearly. And our lawyers have put a lot of restrictions on how people may participate, or which countries should participate. For example, for both US and Singapore, we said it's only open for accredited investors, right? And we take it self-declaration from the website, right, and make sure that they are really accredited.
Right. Okay. So if we could talk about now the cap. One of the rare things about your recent ICO in terms of the pre-sale was a very, very small cap with the pre-sale of only 2 million. Why did you make it so small and thus make it very scarce and hyped right around the world?
I mean, again, I'm a conservative person, right? I choose, how I spend money very, very carefully, right? I don't throw money away. And I felt $10 million is a large amount, right? And I still believe it is a large amount. And a lot of companies are raising too much money, I feel, and probably they don't know what to do with the money, right? And we feel, based on our plans and our roadmap, we could use the $10 million very wisely. And I want to keep a small amount for the pre-sale and kind of test it out. How much is there? How much market is there? Okay. Like I said, right? We want to have more organic marketing. People understanding our idea, people understanding our differentiator, and then they're telling their people they know.
So how did that go, Babu? How did it go with your pre-sale of the $2 million? How easy was it to secure that investment?
So that's very interesting. That's a very good question. We started the pre-sale on February 5th. Right. And if you see the cryptocurrency charts, Bitcoin touched 6,000 exactly the day later, right? Okay. So there was a big crash happening in a lot of the pricing in various cryptocurrencies. Right. And obviously, people have to, do away with their ethers to participate in Zebi. Right. So that was a very headwind against us. And there was a moment where, I thought that even though we had a great product, just because of the market forces, we could have a risk of not closing the pre-sale. Right. And I feel, I think, the innovation of the product finally won over, and we actually closed the pre-sale, before the deadline. Right. We were completely oversubscribed.
So obviously you were relieved by that, but also it bespeaks of the quality of your project, because there were at the same time, there were many other projects that did not make, their caps, did not achieve it. So that does bespeak a lot of what you represent. If we could talk now about obviously the next phase, and that is your crowd sale. That's coming up. Is that right?
Right.
What's the date for that?
That's March 5th.
Okay, so March 5th, $8 million is up for grabs on March 5th. Is that right?
Not exactly. So in the last few weeks, we did have, several of strategic partners approached us and said, we love your product. We want to be part of this, and we want to give you funds. And my first question is, we already closed the pre-sale ahead of schedule. We're oversubscribed, and I don't want to take funds just for the sake of taking funds. Right. What is the real value add for the company? Sure. And some of these, I got incoming requests from several, and I selected a handful. Right. And, I did the personal review because it's so important for the business, for the company's future. Yes. Right. Whoever had either great network, great passion, great interest to help us grow the business, in the area of business development, or very strong foothold in the crypto community, where they could organically spread the message about Zebi, right. Market or spread the message really. Marketing is a little bit of a negative term, but really sharing what sharing the differentiation. Okay. So the other person may use their own intelligence and really evaluate and join the join the crowd.
I see. So what you're saying is that you can see the value of essentially strategic partnerships right now in terms of market sentiment in the crypto space. Clearly, you really value that, which is great. But how has that affected the crowd sale in terms of the access?
We took 6.4 million equivalent in ethers, right? So as of now, we only have 1.6 million remaining.
So we're talking about a super scarce, access point for the crowd sale.
That's the way it happened. I mean, we didn't plan all of that. Again, we spent most of our time building the product, creating, patents, and creating that innovation.
So
we're fortunate.
Right. So early March, we can expect, I would no doubt, that this is going to, I would imagine, sell out very fast.
That's what I would think. Yes. Yeah.
That's interesting. I haven't actually spoken with anyone before at a CEO level where you have such a small cap for the crowd sale. This is probably the smallest I've ever seen.
Thank you. I think it's a great positive, and it's a great positive for all the participants that trusted us early when the Telegram channel was only a few hundred people in the group.
So how is your social media going now?
It's we have a lot of supporters, and we as a company, by the way, the interest that came was actually over $10 million. The interest from the private, sale requests, and I chose to keep the allocation to less than. Total is 10 million. I chose to keep, some allocation for the crowds because these are the people that believed us. They, what we call as gold list. Right. These are the people that joined our whitelist before February 18th.
Right.
And, we have a special category for them. Right. And what we're doing is very, very unique. I don't think many ICOs have done this before. Most ICOs, they're so narrowly focused on raising funds and not caring about the, interests of the participants in the ICO. Right? We consciously said we'll give a guaranteed allocation for all the gold list members as long as they pass KYC, know your customer checks.
Right. Okay. So I guess the thing I want to ask you now is obviously there's a lot of people who have envisaged the investment value. There's no question from the investment side of it, by the sheer nature of crypto, they're doing that. So how is it that you're going to ensure as you roll out the utility, as it becomes a functional system, and it already is, as you've explained previously, how do we convince these people who are considering hodling and using it as an investment vehicle to then transition into its value point as a utility?
I think that's a great question. I mean, I don't have a good answer really. I mean, I'll be honest with you. But I can only say that, we are a true utility token, and whoever is viewing it differently, they're really wrong.
Okay.
Right? I can't stop, people from taking different viewpoints.
Right, and it's the anomaly right now, right across the board, I have to tell you. It really is for all blockchains. But if we could talk now about your roadmap. You've been really crystal clear. I really appreciate your honesty with the ICO. But your roadmap now, let's talk about 2018-19. You've got a very long-term vision. I did read through it. But what's a few points that you want to say, or a few dates and events you want to raise, just in the near future with the next year or so?
Sure. Yeah, I think, the one thing that we didn't really talk about, until now is the Zebi Pay, right? Okay. So I want to mention a little bit about that.
Okay.
So that's obviously as part of the roadmap. Let me actually look at the roadmap here, right?
Sure.
I'm looking at the screen right now, right?
Yep. Yeah, there's quite a few things on the roadmap, I noticed.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't want to, pretend that I remember everything in my head.
No, it's fine. Right? No problem.
So we have 2019 Q2 is when Zebi Pay is scheduled to launch. Right?
It's quite a long time away.
Yeah, quite a few things on the way, right? Obviously, the smart contracts, giving that transparency and visibility. The simpler version is launching in a couple of quarters before, 2018 Q4, this year Q4.
Okay.
That's a big one.
Right.
And in the next few quarters, obviously, we're looking at closing the deals with education sector, employment records, education records. Right?
And that's at the national level, the state levels as well.
Yeah. I mean, so interestingly, there are education records both with private institutions and also with the governments. Right. The primary education, the birth records, those are all with the government. Right. we're talking to both sectors, government and institutions.
So in that respect, Babu, are we talking millions and millions of dollars, or the equivalent of that, when you consider all the different potential contracts you're going to be signing?
I can't give you the exact number, but yes, there is a huge potential because we haven't signed those contracts yet. But huge market out there.
Right.
Just the money lost because of data crimes in India, that's $35 billion just in India, right? Data tampering and data theft. Obviously, this is the money that our customers will save.
Mm-hmm. Right. And obviously that helps your whole country's prosperity economically as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Not just for making money, but yes, it's better life, better world.
Right. Okay. So what other aspects did you want to broach with regard to your roadmap?
Zebi Pay is a big deal because what we are thinking is we'll only do it to make it easy for governments or people that want to really stick to fiat and they don't want to deal with crypto at all.
Okay.
So Zebi Pay will act as the bridge between the people that want to only deal with fiat and Zebi Pay will do the bridging and take care of converting the payments to Zebi coin purchases. Right?
I see. That's very interesting because you are clearly separating the crypto world with blockchain world.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And we feel Zebi Pay could be useful for other projects as well, right? Other projects that have a little bit of utility and they don't know how to deal with customers that want to pay only in fiat, right? Expect demand from other projects to use Zebi Pay. I mean, we don't know yet how. It's still in very early stages of design.
Sure.
But at a vision level, at a market potential level, Zebi Pay itself seems like a huge product of its own.
Absolutely. So Zebi Pay is certainly an exciting project that's in the works right now in the roadmap. Was there any other particular thing, just one more, that you wanted to add that you feel is of value?
Sure. I mean, so smart contracts is obviously a huge thing. I mean, in this interview, we didn't spend too much time there. I guess there was so many other things to talk about.
But it definitely is an essential part. It's integral to everything.
Absolutely. Right. Exactly. Right. In 2020, we expect to create a very comprehensive, compounded smart contracts. Right. And that gives that flexibility, that gives that visibility, transparency to all the parties involved.
Okay.
Data providers, data requesters, and obviously the individual.
Right. Yeah, and that's key. I mean, obviously, the smart contract, that's the fundamental agreement that happens between all of those different parties. And it's been an absolute privilege talking to you about all these different aspects. I have to say, Babu, it is much more robust, I have to tell you, than when I initially first looked at your white paper some weeks ago. When I did initially read it, I thought it was about land predominantly. It's clearly not. And that's why I want to make it clear that you are, in many ways, addressing many industries. You are very multifaceted, many multi-focused. You are the CEO of this company. You do know a great deal about it. You represent it. You're passionate about it. You've explained all about the up-and-coming crowd sale. People will be able to access this, a small number. But is there any final points you'd like to add before the end of the interview?
No, that's we covered a lot. I actually do have my next meeting coming up, so he's calling me.
Sure.
So thank you for your time. I really appreciate you, Brad.
No problem. It's been an absolute privilege talking to you. I wish you all the very best as 2008 unfolds. It's a long-term project. It's only the beginning, really, for Zebi and Zebi Chain. And no doubt, as you unfold, what I'm looking forward to seeing is it move beyond India.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Babu. It's been a privilege.
It's been my privilege.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Brad.